Hello, welcome to Season 7 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, our theme is the current state of horror. We'll be watching 20 or so movies from the last couple of years, reviewing them like normal, and then also talking about some of the larger trends we see. If you want to see the list and follow along, check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Time flies when you can't go outside.
Are we talking about the movie, or are we talking about us in real life?
A little of both, I guess. Yeah.
It really does, man.
Yeah, it seems like we just recorded, and now we're doing another episode, so it feels good. It feels good to have purpose in life again.
It does. Giving me something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of like us leaving the house.
Yeah, a little bit. It's like we're going to this other world where we hang out and aren't separated by hundreds of miles of virus-infected Earth.
That's true. That's very true.
So, had you heard about Mother before?
Yeah, I've definitely heard about it. I remember vaguely it coming out, reading some of it when it came out, but not like it. I figured this would be on like Esquire's list of scariest movies of all time one day.
Yeah. And Sarah and I actually saw it in the theater.
Oh, did you?
And I remember it had a lot of hype around it at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember a lot of people talking about this being the scariest movie they've ever seen, and it being on a lot of lists for that, which, not to give away too much of what we're going to get into, but I'm actually kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you ever see the movie, I think it was called 1408, with Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah, and John Cusack.
Yeah. This movie kind of reminded me of that a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that.
But anyway, I'll introduce it. You can do your facts. We'll get into it. In 2017, Paramount Pictures released Mother, a psychological horror film written and produced by Darren Aronofsky. The film stars Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem as a couple who live in a remote area. Jennifer plays a young wife who is restoring the house after a fire, and Javier plays a successful poet who is struggling for inspiration. When an unexpected visitor stops by, their idyllic existence is completely upended. This movie premiered at the 74th Venice International Film Festival. It was made on a budget of $30 million and made over $44 million at the box office. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Bingo.
So I'm curious, were you able to find much about this one? Because I didn't really find a lot on the internet about it.
I didn't find much. However, what I found was in multiple places.
Oh, yeah.
And so either they all pulled off of one side or they're all true. Yeah. We'll see. So, fact about this movie. Did you know Jennifer Lawrence and Darren Aronofsky started dating during the production?
I did not.
He was 48. She was 27. She's not with him anymore. Just thought I'd tell you that.
Back on the market.
The movie poster for this, have you seen it? The comparison?
Mm-mm.
Look at the movie poster for Mother. It's a replica of Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, interesting.
So Rosemary's Baby has it's on a cliff, and you see an old-fashioned baby stroller, and then the mom's face is looking up. Same thing with Mother. Mom's face is Mother is looking up, and there's the house though, and it's the house instead of the baby character. So in this movie, no one has a legit name.
Yeah.
Mother, him, man, whoremonger, slave driver, and Harold, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And the last fact I have is that this movie was showed at the Venice Film Festival, which Darren Aronofsky has his movie The Wrestler showed there, the Black Swan, and a couple other, and I think he was even like a guest of the festival at one time. However, when Mother showed, it was met with boos and a little bit of cheers. Boos were battling it out with the cheers from the audience.
That's interesting to me.
Mm.
So it was in the Venice International Film Festival, and I think that that's a good way of introducing this movie, because it was not like, the target audience for this movie isn't hardcore horror fans. It's really more of like a sort of an art film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're into that, you probably like this movie a lot more than if you're not. Just random person walks in and watches this one, I don't know that they're going to walk away happy on average.
Yeah, I think you have to know what you're getting yourself into. Like, looking up this movie on iTunes, or like just on my iPhone, I was looking it up and it said it was a drama. But then if you look on, I think it was maybe Amazon, there's another place, if you looked it up, it was saying it was a psychological thriller, and then psychological horror was on another site. So I don't think very many people know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah. It almost seems like you know how there are different styles of art, and so there's like impressionism, and so you might have like different people drawing the same thing, but an impressionist drawing of it will look totally different because like that's their style.
Yeah,
I almost feel like this is like an impressionist version of a horror movie. It's like it's somebody with a totally different style, kind of stepping into the genre. But I do think that like psychological horror would be where to file this one. And one thing that I thought was interesting about it was the way they did the camera work, because it was just very much like in the middle of the scene, like almost like the camera guy is right in everyone's face in this cramped house, and he's constantly having to turn and move to keep them in frame. So then as like more people are coming into the house, it's getting more like crowded and cramped, and the camera's having to react more, and it made me anxious. Like it just felt like uncomfortably close, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of The Shining, because they had like those really long scenes where the camera was just on like somebody's face as they were going room to room, and the stuff in the background didn't always make complete sense. I thought the way that it was made, from just that creating that psychological tension or unease, I thought was really good.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think for me, to be a psychological horror, I think we would almost need to have a little bit of the history of people that are in the film to know if it's normal or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, so if you're, how do we know that's not just like normally how things were with Jennifer Lawrence beforehand, and this is what she's, I don't know. It just seems like you need a little bit of history to know if this is actually a psychological horror to the main character of the film. Could just be any other. I mean, like we've got our history is her waking up and searching for him, our man, Javier, and like we don't know anything else before that, and it makes sense at the end. But it's
I guess I was thinking of it more of like it was trying to create psychological discomfort in the viewer, in that it didn't really explain anything, and you didn't have a lot of background, and you didn't really know what was going on, but just in the way that it was filmed and the acting and everything, it seemed like it was all made to make you uncomfortable and feel unbalanced and not know what was happening, but still have this like underlying sense of danger. And I think that would have been a lot more effective if it was about 45 minutes shorter, because it's hard to keep that up for 2 hours. But I had read that Darren wrote this in like a couple days. Like he had been working on some other,
like 5 days.
Yeah, some other like unrelated project, and then just needed a break and sat down and kind of banged this out quick. So I think the story is kind of reflective of that, in that it wasn't super cohesive. I think it was meant to be read more as like a metaphor
religious.
So I read some about that, but that wasn't really what I took away from it when I watched it.
Yeah, I didn't either, but I can definitely see where it was going at. Like, so from what I was reading, it was saying, like, Ed Harris represents Adam. Yeah, they said when he's puking in the bathroom, you see injury on his rib. Mm-hmm. The next scene, his wife shows up representing Eve. They're allowed to wander in the house, specifically told not to go into the poet's office.
Interesting.
But they do that anyway, where Eve accidentally breaks the fire crystal. They are then exiled, soon begin having sex elsewhere in the house, thus representing the original sin of man's fall from grace after eating the forbidden fruit. And then a couple sons show up, Cain and Abel, basically. Brother kills the other.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. What I took away from it was more like creativity can be a destructive force as well. So, like, the artist needs inspiration for the art, which is then put in front of other people, and then those people feel entitled to it, like it's something that they own too. But then the people who inspired that art may not be on board with that, you know? In this case, you know, he is this famous poet, and, like, the things that he writes about are these things that they take on, like, a life of their own and become super meaningful to a bunch of people who then feel that they are, like, entitled to some sort of ownership of that thing. Mm-hmm. But then when the wife or the kid becomes, like, the inspiration for that, then all of a sudden those people sort of feel like they have some ownership of them as well when they never signed up for that. So that was kind of the thing I took from it, because it seemed like the movie was very much from Jennifer Lawrence's perspective. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of what she was going through, was like all these people sort of injecting themselves into their life.
Yeah, I definitely see that for sure. It just seems like it's open for interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's an interesting idea, but it was also like the first half of the movie kind of made the point, and then it went on for another hour. But
right, yeah, for sure. It was too long.
Yeah, so,
too damn long.
Yeah, but I guess as far as like talking about, so is it fair to say that you did not find this movie scary?
Not at all. No.
So what did you think of, like, the long ending sequence?
So initially when it started, I thought to myself, like, okay, this has to mean the movie's about to wrap up. I guess for me, like, there was nothing really, like, horror related at the beginning of the film. Like, it's all these things are strange, but you don't know why she can't, like, really leave the house. Like, it's just, you're definitely uncomfortable. Like, you're not comfortable watching this movie, which is okay. Like, I understand that. Like, I don't hate that. But then once the long, people start showing up at the end, and it's like, okay, this is getting super strange, and the police show up, and it's just mayhem in there. You know, okay, there's some meaning behind this. I don't really like the movie enough to, like, dive deep into it.
Yeah.
And then, it ends and starts over again, and it's just like, okay, I guess by the time that the last bit of the movie showed up, I was almost frustrated with the movie, because I felt like the whole movie consisted of just Jennifer Lawrence being confused.
Yeah.
And saying, like, why are you here? Get off that. Mm-hmm. What do you it's just like that was the whole movie, that by the end of it, you're like, oh, thank God that's over with. Like, I don't have to deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
But,
it was kind of a long haul, but having seen it before, I kind of knew a little bit better when to be paying close attention, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so I really focused in a lot more on that ending part, just because I remembered that being the interesting one. And kind of from the time when the wake starts at the house on, I thought it did a really good job of, like, escalating. So it was just like this slowly escalating anxious fever dream for, like, the last 40 minutes of the movie. And I thought that was really interesting, because they kept finding new ways to make it more just over the top. And then eventually it crossed, because up until that point, the movie had felt very, like, grounded in reality. And, like, there was weird stuff happening. And there were a couple of times where it felt like time did weird things. Like, it would be the morning, and she would walk downstairs and then walk back up, and it would be night. Yeah. And it felt like it was all meant to just throw you off and make you not feel like you were balanced ever or had things completely figured out. But then there towards the end, it starts getting, like, very, very not real anymore, and to the point where you've got the police scene, and then all these lights and things, and it's almost like not even in the house anymore. And there's, like I said, the Room 1408 or 1408, that movie kind of had some similar elements, I think, where it's just, it goes from, this is a very like grounded in reality, you're supposed to think about yourself in this situation type movie, to more of like a surreal, crazy experience that there aren't rules anymore, and it's just going to get worse and worse. And sort of the, again, I think anxiety is the best way to describe this movie and what it was trying to do. And so I kind of enjoyed that ending part when it was just sort of building up through all of that. And then the scene where she comes out and they've accidentally killed the baby, and then they're like eating it, and then she's trying to stab them, and then they all start beating her. Like, that was so intense, and like that caught my attention again after I had kind of tuned out. So I guess from like looking for things that are like scary or in the horror realm, I felt like that scene kind of got into it. Like it kind of got into the point of, it's hooked me a little bit, but for 2 hours worth of movie, that wasn't a whole lot of payoff.
So watching this initially and like going into it not knowing or being prepared for like, oh, this movie is supposed to, I don't know, stand for something else, or whatever it's supposed to mean. It was really frustrating to watch, and like, okay, where's like what's the horror aspect? And I understand like the second half, like that would definitely be super crazy, and like the other horror part is, I think, being in a house with your spouse, and like seems like, you know, they're not understanding everything that's going on. Like you're having issues with Michelle Pfeiffer's character, and she's being like super aggressive. You're trying to get them out. Like I could see that, claustrophobic, or like you want them gone, they won't listen. I could see like that, but I mean that's still not a horror in my opinion. Like I feel like if this is considered horror, then Aronofsky's other movie, the one about Requiem for a Dream, might as well be considered one as well. Like that's pretty crazy as well. It involves heroin. People die. I don't know. So it just I didn't see the horror aspect. And it's like, is it a cult, you know, kind of thing, or which is like you don't really know, but
because you definitely get the feeling that the outsiders or the people showing up or have some kind of ulterior motive.
Yeah. It's like, you know, something weird's going on too with them all showing up. Like, you know, that's the case. It's just like they're showing up, and Javier's character is just like chill with it, and like he seems to be having a good time. And you're like, okay, is it just Jennifer Lawrence doing something weird? Like maybe whatever that yellow drink is that she drinks at the end or during the movie, until she's pregnant. I don't know. Like, you just kind of think like, okay, well, who is the crazy person here? And then, you know, you find out that they're all kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was a weird one for sure. Which, and I feel like in general, this would be one of those like love or hate type movies.
It's absolutely that, yeah, for sure.
And so our new feature question of the week for this week is, if you had to grade this movie as either an A or an F, which would it be and why? So send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com with your answer, and you will be entered in the weekly drawing to win a movie ticket.
Yeah. Good luck winning over me, you jerks.
How many email addresses do you have?
Enough
I can tell they're from you. You put your name at the end every time. Yeah. But this, so yeah, that's, I feel like this was a very polarizing movie. And I think it's kind of a one-trick pony in that it creates that anxious feeling through the whole thing, but it's also a long haul, so it's kind of hard to maintain that. And so I think it probably works for some people. Like, I really liked the movie making of it. I thought that the directing and, like, just the quality of how the movie was made was awesome. But then the story was a little all over the place. So,
well, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you were talking about reminding you of The Shining, because I think one of the things they were doing in Shining was to keep the audience confused on like where things were and all that. And I think they were doing that with the house as well. Like, you know, Jennifer Lawrence was walking. I mean, there's a scene where man and woman end up in a room and mother ends up in the same room, but they go in completely different directions of the house and just kind of wind up like just a circle. And it shows Jennifer Lawrence walking through the different rooms, and it's just kind of being a big circle. So it does throw you off, you know, and well, that was done really well. I mean, for sure. It was just the fact of like, I think for me, I wish I'd known that this definitely like, that there's deeper meaning to it, and I can know a little bit more about that before watching it and not just watching it at, you know, face value.
Yeah. Well, and that's too, like, I feel like if you went and saw this at a film festival, like your expectations would be more properly calibrated than if you were to like pay money to go to a theater to see a horror movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what you were saying about similarities to The Shining kind of segues nicely into our discussion about how does this fit into, or how is this reflective of the state of horror movies in the current time. And I think that references is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have, you know, nearly 100 years of horror movies to draw from. And I think that a thing we see fairly often in new ones is references to old ones. Whether that's, you know, a Creature from the Black Lagoon playing on the TV in the background or whatever. But like with this one, as you mentioned, the movie poster is a reference to Rosemary's Baby, which I didn't realize. But also, I really feel like a lot of the shots inside the house were very like a nod to the Stanley Kubrick's filming style in The Shining.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is a just up-to-date film that has a bunch of hidden references in that is going to be happening until the end of the time when it comes to movies and when it comes to people claiming that they're horror movies. And I think that that's a good and bad thing. I think it's going to be, if it's someone's interpretation of, like, say, for example, this movie's the interpretation, you know, of the Adam and Eve, God, Mother Earth thing, that situation. If this is his interpretation, then we're going to eventually have 3,000 movies that are an interpretation of the same situation, and we'll probably watch them and have to try to decipher who's Adam and who's Eve and who's God and who's Mother and Earth. And it's like, if I watch a horror movie, I don't want to have to think too much. I don't mind some.
But
it's also like a known thing, at least if you've been listening to podcasts since the beginning, where it's like, you know, my obvious preferences and, you know, like your preferences, like we both have different preferences when it comes to horror movies, and that's all fun and games until we have to watch Mother. Or
Under the Skin.
She's all that. Under the Skin.
We both hated that movie, so
yeah,
that's
true.
fine. Yeah,
I don't mind watching these, like this style, if it's not 2 hours long.
Yeah,
because my brain just gets overloaded, and I don't have a high attention span. So it's like, if we're gonna watch these, let's. Anyway, I think that's just what's gonna be. I think we're gonna be getting, and it's been happening. I think we're just gonna get more modern, not reflection, but interpretation of past events, like the beginning.
Interesting.
Like Adam and Eve, and then we're gonna have a Noah's Ark one, I'm sure, and then I think it's just gonna.
One thing too on this one, and you mentioned like modern interpretations of things. I felt like, again, we saw mental illness or mental health is kind of a factor in this one.
Yeah.
I think that again was sort of because, you know, she's taking that yellow powder when she's starting to feel like really out of it, and that seems to help. And so I think you're supposed to interpret that she is has some kind of mental condition, and it doesn't really go into it or explain it, but that's definitely like an underlying thing throughout the movie, is you're trying to figure out, how much of what's happening is actually, creepy or cause for concern versus how much of it is in her head. And again, I think that's a thing we're going to see again and again and again, because now in society, like, mental health is a big part of the conversation and a big part of how we see things. And so it's a thing that will be used for horror movies, in the, whether it be the way that they are interpreting a story or the events or the way that you're understanding it, or if it's just like they're using that as a way to induce horror.
Yeah. I mean, give me a butcher knife, you know what I mean, and a guy who just can't die.
Yeah, right. Well,
and I'll be on my way.
I think you may be happy with the movie choice for next week then, because it is almost completely the opposite of this movie.
That's what I'm talking about.
So yeah.
Which one is it?
The First Purge.
Oh, yeah. First Purge. Yeah. I'm, all in all, though, will I watch this movie again? Not unless we do it for the podcast. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I've seen it. I'd rather read about it. I think I've, find people's interpretation of the movie a little bit more interesting than the movie itself, but did okay, Darren Aronofsky. Aronofsky.
Would you rate this above or below Under the Skin?
I would make them equal.
Wow, you really hated this movie. Okay.
I did not like it.
All right.
I was going to say this in the facts, but it set the record for of how many times I said this is not a horror movie out loud while watching the movie.
All right. Well then, there you go. That is our episode.
But don't let
week.
that influence. Yeah, but don't let that influence your answer to us. Like, I won't.
Yeah.
I don't hate you for thinking not my way. For not thinking my way.
That's kind of your thing, though.
Well, yeah, I don't want to scare them. I'm not going to argue because I hate confrontation about it.
Okay. Yeah.
However,
you'll just complain about them to me privately later.
Yeah, and you'll get bad seat tickets. No. No.
All right, cool. Well, we are done for this week. We will be back next week with The First Purge. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening. Oh, it's going.
Oh, man. Mother! I can't do that. Oh, damn it. That's the only song I've listened to while getting pulled over for speeding. It's happened twice.